Ladies and gentlemen, after 14 months, here's my review of A Quiet Place Part 2. I watched this in March 2020, and ever since then I've been waiting for the chance to finally talk about this a little more in detail. Social media reactions had lifted by then, so if you follow me on social media, you probably know already what I think of the film, but I already gave my brief thoughts on it. Let's talk about it a little bit more. Taking place immediately after the events of the first movie, the family, being led by Emily Blunt this time, are trying to get to a safer place, a quieter place, if you will, when things go horribly wrong and they end up with Cillian Murphy's character. And it turns out that whatever was going on in the first film is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more out there, it's a lot more dangerous, and it's a lot scarier. So, in a situation which demands that something more be done about it, Millicent Simmons' character, the daughter, who happened to find a way of using high frequency in the first movie to finally ward these things off, tries to go on a mission of her own to potentially stop these things once and for all. That's the brief synopsis that I can give you. It's also the first few minutes of the movie, so it's not really a spoiler, but this movie decides to change perspectives a bit. Whereas the first movie followed the parents a lot more, bringing their children up and trying to adapt them to a world which was an absolute chaos because of these sensing monsters. In part two, it's the kids who are starting to grow up and become part of this world and essentially take on responsibilities of their own because the dynamic has changed. They've lost their father, and so suddenly they're having to grow up really fast, and it's not always the easiest thing for them to do. And what follows is a movie that's very emotionally impacting, but it's also really, really well done. I think maybe I like part two more than I like part one, which is saying something because part one was fantastic. I love that. It was a great cinematic experience, and watching it in a theater, a packed theater, where everyone who was trying to make a sound was immediately shushed, and then it was absolute pandemonium at points when some great scene happened, was really extraordinary. And just witnessing that tension again with part two was extraordinary because I watched this in, again, a packed theater, but when those tense moments came in, just the way everything just settled down, the way the people were reacting to it was really extraordinary. Since the pandemic started, I can't say there's too many movies I'd say go to a theater and watch, but if I had to endorse one, I'd say it's this one. If you have a chance to go see this in a theater, I highly recommend it. Just that this is the one you should probably break the curfew for. Of course, if it's safe. I think this is a brilliant theatrical experience. Right from the opening scene alone, which I don't want to spoil just in case, this film is constantly unnerving and tense, and it's brilliant. The sound design in this movie is off the chain. It is so meticulously done and so brilliant. It even tops the first movie, which already had brilliant Oscar-nominated sound design, by the way. And it's coupled with brilliant performances. Emily Blunt is once again terrific, but the two standouts in this movie that people are going to walk away talking about are Millicent Simmons and Cillian Murphy. Millicent Simmons in particular, last year, when I first saw the movie, I thought she deserved a Best Supporting Actress Oscar nomination for this performance, and now that it's 2021 and that's when this movie is coming out, I endorse her for the 2021 Oscar nomination. She is brilliant in this, and she is the beating heart of the film. The way that she's trying to process certain things that have happened so far, while also trying to do some stuff to help now, given everything that's going on now, is really, really phenomenal. And Cillian Murphy's character is someone who grows on you a lot too, because when you first start out with him, things seem a little iffy. He seems to be someone who's completely lost all hope. He's like, listen, all we can do is hide now. Nothing's gonna work out. And then as the film progresses and he eventually starts to get to know a little bit more and he starts communicating in very brilliantly done ways with the daughter, he starts to realize a little bit more of what else he can do and what else can be done to potentially save people. And his arc was also really, really great. He becomes sort of like a surrogate father figure at points. I feel like I'm spoiling a lot of the movie, but I'm really not. This is really just the first act of the movie, which is just setting up the stuff. I haven't even talked about what happens later, all the stuff that builds to a brilliant final act. I haven't talked about any of that yet. But I'm absolutely raving about this movie because again, I've just had these thoughts condensed in me for so long, and I wanted to get them out finally. Another thing I have to talk about is the visual effects. They are amazing. The cinematography is also absolutely gorgeous. This film looks meticulously crafted from start to finish. And it's also a movie that makes a case for a sequel that should happen, because when I first got done with the first movie, I was like, okay, this is a pretty good contained story. They don't need to make a part two. But then they decided to make a part two, and I thought, I don't know if they need to. Like, what else are you gonna do? And then as this movie starts off, I thought, I see some potential here. Okay, and at the end of this film, I think there's more than enough justifying reasons, I think, to see a part two, especially since it carries forward the story in such a natural way. It doesn't feel forced at any point. It doesn't feel like Krasinski wrote a sequel in because the first one was a major hit or because people loved it so much. There was a story to be told here, and he followed up on that and doubled down on certain things while also subduing certain things and making sure he didn't lose the core of the film, which is very important for something like this, because while that's always about, the 10 sequences, and while there is all of that, action stuff, it's also important that this movie maintain a beating heart, a beating emotional heart, because that's what the movies really are built on. And the fact that this movie carries that perfectly is something to be really praised. I actually thought about flaws. I don't really have that many. I really don't. I've been thinking about this ever since I first saw it, like if there's any major issues I have with it. Not really. No, no. I think my only issue is that sometimes in that focus of those two characters that I mentioned, you sometimes lose focus of Emily Blunt's character, even though she's such an integral part of things. Sometimes you have her sideline, like she has like what 20 minutes in the middle where she's just not there, and the movie's not that long. But aside from maybe just a few things here and there, and maybe a couple of moments here and there could have been fleshed out a little bit more, I loved A Quiet Place Part 2. If this was a movie that came out in 2020, it would have definitely made my top 10 of last year, but I'm gonna probably have to settle with the fact that it might make my top 10 this year. I absolutely adore this film, and I highly recommend checking it out as fast as possible, and whenever you get to. However, if you cannot go to a theater right now, it is going to be out on Paramount Plus in 45 days, apparently after the release. So if you can't go to the theater, you can check it out over there. I'm going to give A Quiet Place Part 2 a 9.5 out of 10. Whew! Finally, I have been waiting to do that. It's so great. Thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more reviews very soon. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.